Hi, everybody, and welcome to Living Well this week. Glad that you've joined us, and I'm thankful to Sam who took over last week. I had something that I had to go to, and Sam took it, and I'm so glad that she did. She talked about joy and finding joy in all circumstances. So we're just glad that you're here. Now, tonight we're going to talk about the topic of parenting when one of the parents has a mental health issue and a mental health treatment. And we're going to have a very frank and honest conversation, not rehearsed at all, and with somebody that I really, really love. And I sleep with this person, or usually, sometimes, because I snore, it might not be the best of situations. But I want to introduce to all of you my wife, who is in the same house with me, but we're using two different cameras just because it works better. So, welcome, Donna.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here tonight.
Are you sure? Are you for real? You're glad to be here?
Yeah,
These
I
kinds
am.
these kinds of things make her nervous usually, and she does very well with them. But she's not. It isn't that she wakes up, in the morning and says, "I'm going to get on Facebook Live." Hey, I'm wondering if before we talk about parenting when there's a mental health issue in the family, um, I'm wondering if we could just briefly touch on, and if you maybe tell the folks a little bit about something we finished that's for pastors and their spouses, and it's called Healing the Heart Wounds of Ministry. And Donna's been part of that. So why
Yeah,
don't you tell the listeners this evening?
yeah. I'm really excited about what we've got going and the writing that we did for this. It's kind of like trauma healing, but it's for pastors and their wives. And Brad and I, understanding those roles very well, we know how much uh, trauma can happen behind the scenes in a church. And so I'm so excited to be able to bring hope and healing and resilience to pastors so that they can, and their spouses, so that they can hang into ministry for a lifetime.
Yes. And, we know very well that in ministry there are wounds that are caused to you personally, from rejection, hurts, and things that people do and they say, and sometimes our children hurt because of it. They say that too, that pastors and their pastors especially suffer as much trauma as policemen do, and we're frontline people, and so it's one of those deals where, yeah, for sure, for sure. And we're having the first one in January or July. I'm in the wrong time of the year.
Yeah, July in St. Louis.
Yeah,
Yeah,
July in St. Louis, and we'll be there for the 20. It's the last Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Saturday in July. Yeah.
So if there's any pastors listening, it's for pastors and spouses, and it will be starts on a Thursday afternoon or evening, and goes till Saturday at noon. And if there are any pastors or folks like that that might want to attend, email me, Pastor Brad at freshhope.us, Pastor Brad at freshhope.us, and maybe Maria can put that in the message area. And you can just email me and let me know that you'd like to attend. All right. Well, let's get down to this topic, Donna. I wrote an op ed recently and I had just some simple insights for folks. Honey, we never really have thought about this, but we lived through hell more than once, and we were busy parenting, and we had young kids. We didn't go through this alone. We went through it, our family went through it. And certainly, whenever there's a mental health issue that somebody has, the whole family's affected by it, just as they would be if somebody had cancer and had to have treatments or whatever. Um,
Right.
but maybe let's talk about what I was like prior to bipolar disorder. And,
That was a long time ago.
I know. But, and then I just want to talk about kind of the pattern of how we got and what it was like even before that, right before. So, tell me about, because one of the things you said to me is, I know who you are separate of bipolar disorder. And so tell us a little
Well,
about that.
I knew you to be very funny. You've always been funny. You're still funny, but you were a man that had very solid boundaries. You had very concrete beliefs. You were very loyal, hardworking. Um, you were always been very creative, and you enjoyed being around people. You were always the probably the loudest one in the room,
Oh,
and yeah,
imagine
you like
that I'd be
yeah
the loudest one in.
you were always the life of the party when we were with other people. So that's what you were like before. You never met a stranger. You talked to anybody. Yeah.
So, as and for those of you who don't know the story, there was a point at which in my early 20s I took a lots of rounds of steroids for a reason that we don't need to get into, but I had to take these steroids. And my father had bipolar disorder. I didn't know that it was hereditary. His looked very different than mine. He had depression more, he had type 2. And it's one of those things that he, well, the steroids destabilized my mood. And that's probably when I started to really have issues. And so, can you talk about that, like what it was like when I was at the seminary, maybe? And
Yeah,
uh,
I started to see you obsessing about little things that you had not done in the past and worried about. You had a germ phobia that just continued to get worse. But I really noticed that. And you were not one to worry, but you started to show signs of worrying about various things. Those are probably the first things I noticed were going on. Do you want me to go on?
yeah.
And then as you finished the seminary and you took your first call, and there was more stress, I could see it winding up, and you started to get pretty intolerant of people that didn't do things the way you thought they should be done. Um, I hate to say it, but you kind of got where you were better than anybody else
Oh,
was,
yeah, yeah.
and nobody could do it as well as you could, which was not somebody you were before that. And you became less and less available emotionally to me and the kids
Yeah,
as
and that
time went along.
was, and I think I became more irritable and agitated at times, where I
Yes.
would just lose my cool out of the blue with the
Yeah.
kids, and
Your patience got to be pretty null and void.
yeah, but other times I could put up with quite a bit, and then
Yeah. Other times you'd be, let's go do this, and we'd have a great time. And then the next day you would be totally different. So you never knew who you were going to have.
well, and the worse, the sicker I got, then
Yeah.
the more all of these things got to be more and more right, and,
Right.
and certainly. Before I was diagnosed and before I had the manic episode that landed me up in the news, I was beginning to really not be well, right? I mean, I had that trip to Africa and we spent time on the phone with me fighting with you.
Terrible. We fought on the phone while you were in Africa. That
Yeah,
was really hard.
it was
And
like
then
a
I think,
$150 fight.
yeah, and the last trip you took was to South Dakota, and you were doing something for the Senate at that point, and that really, I believe, finished you off.
Yep, yep,
And you came back, and you were somebody I had never seen before. That those 2 days, and then you crashed and burned,
yep.
and I could see it coming a year before. I had let some people know I was concerned a year before you crashed.
Yeah, and
I saw it happening.
nothing was done. People were worried that it would slow the growth of the church down.
Yeah.
I had asked, I said, I think I'm burned out. I think there's something wrong. Now, we don't blame anybody because
No,
everybody
nobody knew.
could, but I would have never, ever had said, oh, I think maybe this is bipolar disorder because I mean, it didn't look at all like my dad's. So, didn't
And
even,
it didn't look like my mom's either because my
yeah.
mom was bipolar. But hers was like your dad's. It was depression. And so this was different.
Yep, yep. So now I end up crashing and burning. It becomes very public. So our kids are in second grade and sixth grade. They're old enough to know what's around them. They can tell something really bad has happened. And they weren't necessarily part of any conversations per se on the inner circle or anything, but everything was out in the news, and so we had to talk about it to a certain degree with our kids. I don't recall that I probably was not part of the conversation at that point. You probably talked with them, if I remember.
I think I did. And I had a different conversation with Noel than I had with Noah because of the age difference. But you try to keep it age appropriate, not tell them anything they didn't need to know, but tell them enough so they didn't become too scared and concerned. Um, it was hard, and I can tell you, we did not do it well.
Well, we did.
we
Well,
we messed up along the way.
yeah,
We learned as we went along, but that's what it takes. You kind of have to learn as you go along. But we learned how to face the issues and talk about them and give the kids room and space to feel their own feelings about it. And, I know for our daughter, especially, her friends' parents would let her come to their house, but they would not let their children come to our house, which really hurt us and hurt her. And it was hard on our son just because he was really old enough to know what was going on. And
yep,
he was quite devastated by it.
yeah, and he
But
really found his own way in the church and
yeah,
found kind of his niche, and yeah, unfortunately, then, the church kind of dropped us. No one ever reached out to our children or to you separately. It was always in regards to me. And um, yeah, and we could go through all the things the church at that time did not do or know to do.
right.
And we've made amends with the leaders and people that were involved, but it's just one of those things where it's just very,
Everybody did the everybody did the best that they knew how to do in the situation.
yeah.
Yeah,
Having been through it, we would know a lot of other things today, but
yeah,
that's neither here nor there. One of the things that I want to say to those of you who are listening who have children, you know, um, having a mental health issue for one of the parents is really no different than a lot of other situations that are have to do with health, because this is it. When you have a mental illness, it is physical health. It is your brain is part of your physical being, and it's not your mind. Your brain is what your mind, or your mind is what your brain does, and but The good news, before anybody gets to worrying too much, is that children are pretty resilient. Everybody screws up as a parent. Nobody does it perfectly. And the good thing is if you ask your children, own up to it, and ask them for forgiveness or whatever, kids really do come out okay. And in
Yeah.
fact, I would say our children are pretty darn resilient themselves because of so much of what they've gone through. The Lord's used that for their good, right?
Yes, and I would say there's really three things that I remember during all that time is you need to make sure your kids know you love them. They need to know they're loved. They need to know that they're heard and that children are resilient and they will get through it.
Yeah, I think that's really important to know that they're loved
Yeah.
and to give them some sort of stability. And
Yeah.
part of that,
Routines are very important. And the kids and I established a routine that really kind of helped us get through. Sometimes dad would participate and sometimes he wouldn't, but it was okay.
yeah, yeah. And our kids went away a couple of times, right? They went to
Yeah.
the farm with a dear friend of ours and did fun things. And so they got away and they had their own space and didn't have to hear anything about anything. And yeah. Yeah. One of the other things that I think is important is just to be honest and upfront with the children, because kids will write their own narrative. If you don't tell them what's going on, they're gonna they know something's going on, and then they're gonna kind of make up their own story to what it is. And many times kids blame themselves. When parents become
Yeah.
divorced, for instance, they'll say, "Well, it must have been because of me." And
Yeah.
so I would encourage you, if you're parenting and somebody has a mental health issue, you got to be honest. When mom's depressed or dad's depressed, and if there's been a hospitalization or whatever, it's there is no shame in it, and it's no
But
different.
just to assure them that they were not the cause of what happened. They
Yep.
had nothing to do with it.
Right. And I think it's real important what you said about making sure they know they're loved.
Yeah.
And it,
Number one.
even I, in my not being emotionally available, hopefully did let them know that I still loved them. I know there were things that Noel or I knew that when I was kind of couch bound, I call it my days of being couch bound, where I just couldn't get up, I couldn't get moving, and I would lay on the couch. And then the evenings, Noelle would lay on my side, and at least we were close that way. And we had done that before everything happened.
She used to sleep with you a few times, and the two of you would turn the Spanish channel on, and you would fall asleep to that, and you were both hoping maybe you'd learn Spanish that way. It
Yes,
didn't work.
yeah, yeah,
But so
because
you had some bonding things during that time.
yeah, and snoring was a problem. And so sometimes mom would move out, but Noelle ended up in the bed, and we would end up watching. Or part of my thing was I put the Spanish channel on only because um, I needed background noise to keep my mind from obsessing and ruminating, and at least I couldn't understand it, so it was just background noise. But yeah, that
Yeah, one of the things that I did during that time when everybody else went to bed, I would get on our computer in our office and I would just play solitaire just to turn my brain off so I wasn't thinking about everything that was happening. And I'd stay up too late, but it gave me some alone time that I didn't get otherwise.
yeah. And did you?
And you need that.
There were a few times where you went out with friends, right? You some of the like last
I'm sure I did.
yeah,
There's a number, I don't remember some things.
yeah, yeah. So one of the things that you did was you made sure that we still did some things as a family that were um, as fun as we could make them, or as normal as we could make them. And one of the things was, and I've talked about this in the book as well as I've told this story many times, you would say to me, because I was agoraphobic and didn't want to leave the house, and I'd have panic attacks and all that, she would come up and say, "We're going for ice cream, and you don't get to say yes or no, you're going." And because that would have been something in the when I wasn't sick that was like, yes, of course, you know. Um, but it was like pulling me out of the house, right?
Yeah.
And you
Yeah,
were,
I might give you the option of which ice cream place, but that was the only option you got to pick
yeah, and then
which one we went
I would
to.
try to talk her into, let's just go through the drive-through. Let's not go in. Let's just go through the drive-through. And we wouldn't. And then we'd go in. And when the children were with us, it helped me. Once I'd get out of the house, I could interact with them a little bit. And sometimes I was faking it. Sometimes I was really forcing myself to do it. But it helped me. And I think it assured them that they hadn't lost their dad totally. Because did you ever talk with the kids that it wouldn't always be this way, that somehow I would get,
Yeah, it would get better. It would take some time, but things would get better, and we would, basically we'd probably have a new normal, but it would be okay.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
new
The
normal.
Lord would get us through it all.
Yep, yeah, yeah. And the other thing is that you know, life changed for us because I wasn't pastoring during that time. So Sunday mornings were different. And we were asked to not go to the church that I had been pastoring, told that we couldn't go. And so we had to find something else and do something different during that time. So I know our children have some heart wounds yet from those days. I I know,
Yeah.
and you know, pastors' kids see the church from the inside out, so to speak, and so they see the best parts, but at times they also see the some of the worst parts. And yeah, so we in you had to take over, so to speak. You had to do everything, right?
I had to drive.
Yeah,
Yep, I
even
had to do all the parenting, everything that had to do with the household, paying the bills, mowing the yard. Well, I usually mowed the yard, mowing the lawn, taking care of the cars, everything that had to be done, I had to do for a while. And it took me a while to get used to doing all of that. And then when Brad started to get better, it was hard for me to let go of being in charge of everything. And so it was a bit of a struggle to find our places back where they were before. But I'd say today we're doing very well.
yeah, yeah. In
It
fact,
took time.
yeah, yeah, I
Yeah.
did, and now it's much more like it was, and it's better. Really, our relationship's better than when I wasn't treated for the bipolar, because yeah, we won't even go into that.
I think people who have spouses that travel a lot have that same issue because the the parent that's at home creates a routine with the kids, and when the parent that travels come home, they mess up the routine. And so it was that same kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, we kind of had to elbow each other a little bit, and we got it figured out. The interesting thing is that when you go through that sort of thing, you don't know that if what you're doing is the right thing or whatever, but you can kind of tell. And you know, sometimes you just have to kind of feel your way through it, right? We were just
Yeah. You just got to
attempting
keep
to,
walking. You got
yeah,
to keep moving. You can't sit down and quit. You just take one step at a time and you find your way through it. And I have to say, for us, God did put some significant, wonderful people in our lives at that point that
absolutely.
really helped us begin to heal.
Yeah, we couldn't have done it without them. What's the one thing you would suggest to people who are listening and maybe they're the person who does not have a mental health issue and their spouse does and their spouse is just not carrying their weight. They're out and so to speak. What would you say to them?
I would say the first thing is understand their diagnosis, because with that, you can understand what's happening to them. That would be my number one. Um, the other thing is don't be too hard on yourself because it's hard. You're doing something you've not had to do before. So make sure you take some time for yourself along the way, or otherwise you won't make it. And, if you have children, just make sure you can be attentive to them as much as you can. Sometimes it's hard because you're exhausted from taking care of everybody and everything, but you can do it. Those would be
Yeah, and you just
some of
keep
the main things.
uh,
Keep going.
now, I think it's important for you to also try to laugh and do some things that are fun. Just don't obsess on how horrible.
Don't live in the seriousness of it all the time,
Yeah,
because you won't make it through.
yeah, and sometimes you have to, as much as you can, turn something off and just change the gears, so to speak. The other thing is that if you are going through a mental health challenge and you have children, and it's most mental health issues are thought to be somewhat hereditary. And that doesn't mean your children will have the issue. It just means that they could develop it, just like if there's heart problems in a family or, whatever it might be, diabetes or whatever. And so you want to let your kids and educate them at the right age and help them. But the key single most important thing you can do for your children is help them learn how to deal with stress in life and how to have emotional regulation. And because stress is when you have to have the kind of that perfect storm for a mental illness to finally make its ugly way out of the pen, if you will. And, that's just one of the things you can do. And the other thing is, Donna, would you say that it's fair to say you tell the kids enough, you tell them what's appropriate for their age, tell them
Yes.
enough, and if they ask questions, you answer them. And
Yes.
if they don't ask about something, don't tell them that part if you don't think it's necessary. It's kind of like,
Don't go places you don't have to go.
yeah, yeah. And they'll ask it when it's on their mind. It's kind of like we lost Donna's mom to suicide, what, 5 years or 6 years
Or
or,
was 89.
yeah, so 7 years or six.
Yeah. 6 years. Yeah.
Yeah. And we were told then with the children, you talk about that Lala passed away. And if they don't ask how did she die, you just let it be that. And they were quite young back then,
Yeah.
2 and 6.
Yeah.
But you wait, and when they ask, well, how did she die? Well, she had something wrong with her brain, and it made her really sad. And then, but how did she die? Well, then you can get into, but it took them a long time before they ever even asked that. And I'm not sure they ever really finally did. It was
I
something,
think Noah did, because Noelle didn't because she was so little, but Noah did at one point. So we just had the conversation.
yep,
But I can tell you one thing you have to have to really get resilience is on your knees in prayer.
yeah,
Without the Lord, I know that I would not have been able to do whatever it was that I did do. He gave me the strength to keep going.
yeah. And he still gives us the strength yet today.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And, you know, the other thing is this one time Donna and I were in to see my psychiatrist. It was one of my appointments, and she went to many of my first appointments and numerous ones through the years. And in fact, I would strongly recommend that you always take your spouse, or that your spouse has access to your doctor, because you're going to get better, and it's going to help the person who's sick, and it's going to help the spouse who's carrying a lot of the weight. But he said to us one time, "You two are taking life way too seriously. You need to lighten up."
Yeah, you did.
And it kind of helped. It helped us kind of laugh, and because he's so dry, his sense of humor is so dry that it was just like hilarious to hear him say that to us.
Yeah.
So, do any of you that are on with us right now live, do you have any questions that you'd like to ask us in regards to the topic of parenting and going through this when one of the spouses has a mental health issue? Feel free to type it in the chat box. I can see the comment box on Facebook, and I'd be happy to ask, or we can attempt to answer any questions you might have. So, and one of the things that was the hardest for, I think, Donna, was carrying the load and not being able to really talk with me about it. Um, and I couldn't share it at that point. I was so tentative, and or I was not stable, and anything could have thrown me off the edge, so to speak. But I'm not seeing any questions come in, so we'll just assume we covered it all. More than anything, just know God is a God of second chances and new beginnings, even with parenting. you know and some of you might be watching this and saying, oh, thankfully we don't have a mental health issue. Well, trust me, you've all got emotional issues, and kids make it past their parents' emotional issues also. So anyway, but uh, that I want to make sure you all know that you everybody messes up when they parent. And the wonderful thing is that we got to where, if we didn't handle something correctly and it wasn't helpful to our kids, we actually said to them, please, forgive us, and even on my daughter's wedding, I was saying to her, please, forgive me for what I didn't do right. So, but thank you everybody for being here, and we'll be back next. Well, Donna, unless I force her to, she might be back. But anyway, we'll be back next week with another edition of Living Well. And until then, uh, may the Lord keep you living well. And by the way, Donna, thank you so much for helping me tonight. I appreciate it so much. And
You're welcome.
I think people probably want to hear more from you. And so, you, yes, the Lord got you through, but He really did show you a way to go through waters we had never been in before. So thank you. And blessings to all of you. Thanks for joining us this evening.